Hello, this is Sheila Green coming to you from Texas on a very cold and rainy day. So many in our country are either facing snowstorms or firestorms. And so this is a very difficult time for many in our country. But I want to come to you for a very short period of time, and I hope that you stay with me as I share a story that I think is timely to be told. And the name of this is Maria's story. As we gear up for the ugly business of mass deportations, I wanted to share a story of two paths that have crossed, and it's mine and Maria's. And this is Maria's story. I felt it so impactful and so needed to be told that this is the second time I'm actually telling the story. I've also gone Facebook Live to share the story. I share it on YouTube because I'm hopeful that in the months ahead that this recording will be available to people who might need to hear it. And so I share it with you now. I met Maria during an office a doctor's visit. We struck up a conversation and I felt a connection with her. She began to share with me her life, and I was drawn even more to her. And as I have a YouTube channel and also I have a Facebook page, I asked if she would share her story with me so that I could share it with you. So, for as long as she's willing to share, I hope to tell her story in segments. And this is the first part. I want to tell her the story of her and her family because of the plight that many families like herself will face because of the attitudes towards my immigrants. Those who continuously try to become documented and spend thousands of dollars to do so. To tell the story of those who are undocumented and live among us as our neighbors. Maria is not the first person that I've met, however, that desperately wanted to be an American citizen. And I am so, so grateful that she was willing for me to share her story. Before I tell her story, I do want to speak on one young lady that I met when she was still in high school a few years ago, quite a few years ago, actually. She had been in this country since she was a young girl, and her and her family were undocumented immigrants from Mexico. It was a struggle for her family financially. She had a few siblings, and she had a father and a mother. They all lived together. I remember a time when she shared how her father worked and as a construction worker. And one day he went to pick up his check, but was told there was no money for him. And there was nothing that this father and husband could do but to accept the fact that he worked for free. Yes, slavery still exists. And many undocumented immigrants are victims of greedy, heartless individuals. I don't remember this young lady's name, and yet I remember her so clearly, so vividly. She ended up having to drop out of high school because she had to help her family survive. Now I begin the first installment, I hope, of Maria's story. And this story is her own words. She says, my parents and I moved to America when I was about 4 years old. I believe we had papers that allowed my parents to work and let me go to school. However, we didn't have a lot of money. One of the places we lived until my parents were able to make enough money to get our own place was another family's living room. We slept there for a couple of months. Much of my parents' money would go to lawyers in order to get a green card. As a young child, I remember we would go to, excuse me, we would have to go on interviews as part of the application process. I remember the pressure to be very accurate with what we said for fear of being rejected. As a young child, I had to practice how to respond because if I said something wrong, they would deny us and make us go back. We had to travel far distances to these interviews. I don't remember where we had to go, but I remember we would leave early in the morning and not return home until late into the night. We would have to wait hours in the waiting room for our turn to be interviewed. The interviewers would ask so many questions, and I believe this is why our days would be so long and tiring. As a child, I remember having to do this from the ages of 4 to 18. My parents had to change lawyers a few times, and the amount of money spent on lawyers was in the thousands. My dad worked at Burger King in the morning and at McDonald's at night. My mom would clean houses and also clean hotel rooms. As a young child, my parents would sometimes have to take me to work with them because there was no one who would watch me. My parents were able to get a one-bedroom apartment and had barely any furniture, but it was our home. I remember it being around Christmas and my parents could not afford Christmas presents. My mom started taking English classes at night. We did not have money for a car, and I believe my parents, because of their legal status, were not allowed to get a driver's license anyway. So we walked everywhere we needed to go. My school was 1 mile away from my home, and I had to walk it in all types of weather in all the seasons in New York. My dad would walk with me because his job was in the same direction. I can only imagine the pressure our struggles placed on my parents' relationship. My parents separated and their relationship ended. Eventually, my mom met a man who was American and they got married. After some time of them being together and 8 years previously of trying to get a green card, it was her marriage that my mother and I were finally able to get a green card. I believe my mother still loved my father and missed him. However, she stayed with her American husband. Looking back at those times, I remember the pressure I felt in trying to say the right things so that I would not ruin our chances of being approved for a green card. My mother and I had to practice together how to speak and answer questions. As I consider those times, I realize how traumatizing it was for me because I was a kid. Because I was a kid, I usually, and usually kids do not do very well under pressure, I felt things would be said to me by the interviewers that would make me react and that would negatively impact the process. Well, that was a little bit of Maria's story. I share a portion of her story, but there is so much more of her experiences as a young lady in America. I hope that she will allow me to share more. I am a firm believer, or should I say, an optimist, that if only people can hear the stories of our neighbors, that compassion and understanding will be achieved. And people, unlike us, and people who do not look like ourselves or have come from different parts of the world than ourselves, will not be so threatening to ourselves or to us. I want to leave you with a scripture, and it's Matthew chapter 25, verses 31 through 36, and then verse 40. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on the right, "Come, you are blessed by the Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And the king will answer them, "Truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." And so I leave you with the scripture and the story of Maria in hopes that you will not be like so many who are giddy about the thought of mass deportations. And I hope that you will think of the people as being people, and that you will care about what happens to the families, to the mothers, to the fathers, to the children who do not have the papers that we have. Thank you for listening. I hope you share it so that others can also think and pray for those who are going to be the victims of mass deportation. Thank you. Goodbye.